June 6th, 1944, Omaha Beach. When we picture that day, our minds go to the opening scene of Saving Private Ryan. The ramps of the Higgins boats drop, and hundreds of men charge into an icy hell, straight into the teeth of German machine guns. It's an image seared into our collective consciousness, the image of the infantryman storming the beach. But while the camera follows Captain Miller and his men, it misses the figures who were already there, the men who set foot on that sand first. Minutes before the main wave, in the thickest of the fire, a different kind of work was being done, and it wasn't being done by riflemen. They weren't carrying extra ammunition. They were hauling dozens of pounds of explosives, heavy tools, and detonation wire. Their job wasn't to take a pillbox, but to blow it sky high. Not to kill an enemy in a trench, but to give other men a chance to reach that trench. They were tasked with destroying the deadly obstacles known as Rommel's asparagus and Czech hedgehogs, a devilish system of steel beams and mined logs designed to tear the bottom out of landing craft and stop tanks in their tracks. These were the combat engineers, the sappers. And in the first, bloodiest minutes of D-Day, their casualty rates in some sectors reached 70%. They were the first to arrive. Today, we're telling the story of the soldiers who ran towards the minefields. The men whose labor was invisible against the backdrop of great battles, but without whom every brilliant attack would have bled out at the first obstacle. How did these men, whose primary job was to go where everyone else was fleeing from, do their work day after day, knowing they only had the right to make a mistake once? To think of a sapper as just a man with a mine detector is to see only a tiny piece of a giant mosaic. War isn't just about destruction. It is, above all, about movement. And movement is logistics. When an entire army of thousands of men is stopped by a river, a ravine, or a bombed-out city, all its firepower becomes useless. The tanks, the infantry, the artillery, they all grind to a halt. Waiting for the engineers. Imagine this scenario. Your army is advancing through France. Ahead lies a wide river, the only bridge a twisted wreck blown up by the retreating enemy. On the far bank, the enemy is dug in, shelling your position with mortars. What do? Wait for weeks while rear echelon units build a new permanent bridge? By then, the enemy will have reinforced their position and turned the riverbank into an impregnable fortress. This is where the engineers performed miracles. Their greatest trick in World War II was the Bailey Bridge. It was a masterpiece of military engineering, a modular bridge that could be assembled in a matter of hours, often right under the enemy's nose. It was hellish work. You weren't huddled in a foxhole. You were standing in the open, lugging a quarter-ton piece of steel while a sniper tried to draw a bead on you. Men fell around you, but you couldn't stop. A young private next to you might drop a critical connecting pin, and the sergeant, without even raising his voice, would just give him a look that said, "Pick it up, keep moving." Because every single panel, every pin driven home, determined the fate of the thousands of men waiting behind you. The Bailey Bridge wasn't built from steel and wood. It was built from courage, sweat, and far too often, blood. Sappers were the circulatory system of the army. They built the arteries, the roads, the bridges, the crossings through which troops, armor, and supplies flowed. When Patton's Third Army made its famous dash across France, its tanks would have run out of gas at the first demolished bridge, if not for the engineers working around the clock to keep the path open. They were the creators in the midst of the most destructive event in human history. But that act of creation was one of the deadliest jobs of the war. But if building bridges under fire sounds like hell, then you've never walked in a sapper's boots across a minefield. This was the other side of their job. The quietest, most nerve-wracking, and loneliest work imaginable. There's no thunder of battle here. There is only you, the earth, and a ringing silence, broken only by the hammering of your own heart and the soft shink of your probe piercing the soil. The probe, one of the simplest tools, unchanged for centuries. Your job, lying flat on your stomach, is to check the ground before you, inch by agonizing inch. You have to push the probe in slowly, at a shallow angle, to make contact with the side of a mine, not the pressure fuse on top. You have to learn, through the vibrations in your hand, to tell the difference between a rock and a root, and between a root and the dull, solid feel of a mine casing. Your hearing is strained to the limit, because any unfamiliar sound, the snap of a twig under your elbow, the creak of your web gear, can make your blood run cold. Imagine yourself in his place. You're lying in the damp grass. You smell of sweat and fear. You slowly push the probe into the earth. Nothing. Another inch. Nothing. Another. And then, a dull, solid thud. It's not a rock, it's something else. You freeze, holding your breath. Now the truly terrifying part begins. You have to gently, with your fingertips, brush away the dirt around the object. The edge of it comes into view. You recognize it. A teller mine. Your job isn't just to find it, it's to disarm it. You take out your knife and begin to carefully dig, searching for the fuse. Your hands are trembling, but you force them to be still. One mistake, one slip, one moment of lost focus, and it's all over. You won't just be gone. You will simply cease to exist, leaving only a crater and a red mist. It was a duel with an invisible enemy, an enemy with no face, no emotions, just a simple mechanical device, waiting patiently for you to make a single mistake. And the enemy was always evolving. They laid mine gaps, leaving cleared lanes only to rig them with machine guns. They buried mines in layers, disarmed the top one, and you might trigger a second one beneath it. They attached anti-tampering devices, fuses designed to detonate if the mine was lifted or the primary fuse was unscrewed. It was a monstrous game of chess, where every move could be your last. Of course, there were cruder methods. The Bangalore torpedo, essentially a long pipe packed with explosives. You'd shove it into a wire obstacle or a minefield and detonate it, clearing a path several feet wide. It was fast, effective, and loud. Incredibly loud. You were essentially ringing a dinner bell for every enemy machine gun and mortar in the area. Using a Bangalore meant drawing all the fire directly onto your position. The psychological pressure was immense. Sappers lived in a constant, heightened state of awareness. They couldn't afford a moment's distraction. Fatigue, bad weather, fear, any of it could lead to that one fatal error. There was a grim saying that passed between combat engineers, one that perfectly described their reality. A sapper has two lives, one to learn and one to work. In training, you could make a mistake and an instructor would just yell at you. In the field, you didn't get a second chance. It wasn't just a joke, it was a harsh philosophy of survival, a mantra they repeated to themselves with every step into the unknown. Wars are not just won by generals drawing arrows on maps, or by heroes raising a flag over a captured city. Wars are won through the quiet, methodical, and deadly dangerous work of men who are rarely seen in the movies. Sappers are the invisible foundation of any army. Without their courage and cool-headed professionalism, the most brilliant battle plans would remain just lines on paper. They didn't seek glory. They simply did their job, a job on which the lives of thousands of their comrades depended. They were the surgeons who cut the cancer of barbed wire and minefields from the body of the earth. They were the architects who built bridges to victory from steel and grit. They were the silent guardians who always walked first so that everyone else could follow. So the next time you see footage of a great battle, of a tank column advancing, or of troops storming a city, take a moment to remember the men who walked there just hours before. The men who ran towards the explosions so that an army could advance into the silence that followed. Their names are rarely found in the history books, but their invisible footprints are on every road of war.